Hello everyone, and welcome to Verifi's webinar, Building a Recipe for Global Pre-Dispute Success. I'm your moderator for today, Peter Quinn. At any point throughout the webinar, please do feel free to add your questions to the Q&A box on the right-hand side of your screen. We will be having a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Operating globally brings complexity to everyone's business. One aspect of your business that you really should not have complexity around is delivering an exceptional customer experience. In the rare occurrence that something does actually go wrong in the post-purchase environment, sellers and merchants should have policies and tools available to rectify the issue quickly, easily, and exceed the customer's expectations. But in order to do that, sellers need to understand what aspect of their business they need to analyze and what aspects they need to adapt. In today's webinar, we'll explore just that. We have a great panel lined up today. We have Greg Whitten from Verifi, we have Steph Guerrero from Visa, and we have Ben Rabb from Just Answer. Greg, would you introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Thanks, Peter. Hi, my name is Greg Whitten. I've been in the payments business for around 20 years in a number of different roles, and spent the last 2.5 years leading the direct merchant sales efforts at Verifi.
Hi everybody, I'm Steph Guerrero. I work on the post-purchase product team here at Visa, and prior to my work here at Visa, I was part of the Verifi executive team for about 8 years. So over the past 15 years, I've had the pleasure of working with merchants and issuers and advising them on best practices and solutions for managing fraud and consumer disputes. So I'm really happy to be here today.
Hi, I'm Ben Rabb, Director of Payments for Just Answer. We're the largest online platform that brings together doctors, lawyers, veterinarians, mechanics, and other verified professionals to answer questions in real time, 24/7/365. I've been in payments for the past 25 years, and prior to joining Just Answer, I was with the Digital Asset Network, where I ran their retail business unit that encompassed blockchain-based payment and remittance products, such as crypto-backed prepaid debit cards and cross-border money transfer products. I spent most of my career in payments with one of the schemes in a variety of global product and processing roles.
The payments industry is one that is constantly evolving. Merchants need to keep up with the changing car brand rules, new technologies, and also consumer behavior. This is especially true as after the last 2.5 years, we've seen a huge paradigm shift as businesses adapt to stay open. I'm going to throw our first question today at you, Steph. Can you give us some perspective on the growth and challenges that you've seen working with Visa's top 300 merchants?
Yeah, Peter, to say that the last few years have been interesting is an understatement. So I recently read a really interesting article that highlighted a way that I think it describes it most what we've seen here at Visa. It reported that in a period of just 8 weeks over the pandemic, that 6 times more consumers were working from home. 4 times more consumers were buying groceries online instead of going into the grocery store. And 4 times more consumers ordering takeout from their aggregators or their favorite restaurants. 3 times more consumers were shopping online for things other than groceries. So the major shift from in-store to online was something that we definitely saw over the course of the last couple of years.
So Greg, building on what Steph said, Visa and Verifi have a lot of intelligence and insight into C&P volumes and corresponding dispute volumes. Can you talk us through the dispute growth and how that's affecting the merchants that you work with?
Yeah, Peter, if I had to sum up the impact to merchants in 2 words, I'd say challenging and overwhelming. Kind of unpacking the question a little bit more, as the stat on the screen states, we saw a 34% rise in card-not-present transactions in 2021 over 2019. So for merchants, kind of enabling this digital transformation during the times of COVID was really an all-hands-on-deck exercise to keep sales coming in the door. What most didn't anticipate or plan for was the rise in disputes that would follow. Now we know, based on some of the data that we can see, that card-not-present transactions are 60 times more likely to be disputed versus card-present transactions. So without tools, merchants were left throwing people at the problem. And then, to boot, just to keep things really interesting, hiring those people became much more difficult and much more costly as wages and inflation kind of took over. So not a lot went right for merchants when it comes to disputes over the last couple of years.
Thanks, Greg, for that great insight. Working here in the marketing team at Verifi, the majority of what we talk about during our webinars or speaking engagements or even in the media focuses on the strategies that merchants can utilize to improve the post-purchase experience. And, you guessed it, it's because disputes take place after the transaction has been completed. And disputes do play a huge role in how consumers engage with sellers, and it actually impacts their attrition rate as well. The general definition of the post-purchase experience is how you treat a customer after they purchase a product or service. But that is different for everybody, and it can range from customer service engagements to even post-purchase marketing, communication strategies, and even if something goes wrong with the transaction. Then, in the preparation for today's webinar, we discussed Just Answer's approach to the post-purchase experience, and you had some great insight. I'd love if you could share that with our audience today, please.
Yeah, sure, Peter. Just Answer's culture puts the customer at the center of everything. We want them to use Just Answer every day to get answers to their questions. Customers can use our desktop or mobile platforms, as well as a browser extension on their desktops, to ask questions and chat with experts. We want our customers to have a great experience with Just Answer, and that extends to disputes or even if they decide to cancel. That experience is incredibly important to us because many of our clients who dispute and or cancel realize our service provides tremendous value, so they come back later and resubscribe. Word of mouth is also really important to us, and our current and past members can be some of our best advocates to help us grow the business.
So Ben, would I be right in saying that your focus on the customer experience post-purchase is because you know that if your customer has a good experience, if they're disputing, they're actually more likely to return when they have a need for the product?
Yep, that's it. We've surveyed our members that have canceled and disputed and come back later and found that they returned because they had a positive experience.
And I really like how you articulated Just Answer's approach. I don't think it's in the, quote unquote, traditional thought process when it comes to disputes, but really highlights the need for out-of-the-box thinking. We've seen that type of thinking and concepts pop up in other places as well. There was a fraud study that Verifi and the Merchant Risk Council collaborated with MRC members and non-members. And one of the key takeaways for me was that over the last 2 years, the top 2 priorities for people who responded to the survey, their priorities were customer experience and reducing fraud and chargebacks. I think we're only beginning to scratch the surface when it comes to realizing that disputes create an opportunity for merchants. But I want to caveat that with it really varies by merchant type. We pulled some fraud and dispute reporting based on what we thought were some really interesting MCCs. And I've worked with merchants across all these verticals, and the common theme is that typically they have very liberal refund policies. The challenge, though, is that they actually have an issue having customers contact them directly. So getting the opportunity to connect with their customers prior to filing a dispute is a real challenge.
And when you think about fraud rates and dispute rates for the US versus European rates, they're much lower in Europe because of multiple factors, and one of them being GDPR. Building off of GDPR includes strong customer authentication. And additionally, Europe has widespread adoption of EMV 3D Secure and two-factor authentication. These fraud prevention solutions affect their fraud rates for the better. They're much, much lower there than they are in the US. So the challenges of ratios that are like the ones presented here today, these are skewed when you think about the large digital giants out there, the Googles and the Sonys of the world. So they skew these ratios much lower than for most merchants that are sitting in these MCCs. Theirs will be much higher. So regionally, if you're comparing North America to international regions, the US really does lag the rest of the world. And one reason for this is essentially because of the overall size of the market. So fraudsters will tend to focus on regions where it's easier to commit fraud. With the shift to online, we're seeing so many different fraud attacks in different MCCs. There's phishing, account takeover, loyalty fraud, just to name a few things that merchants are experiencing. And one other thing that is a factor is also regulation. Australia, the UK, and India, they're much higher regulated countries than here in the US. And just one example of this is when you think about EMV, when it was implemented in Europe. Fraudsters shifted to North America because EMV essentially took the card-present fraud out of that region. So what fraudsters are going to do is continually look for weaker lines of defense, prey on those businesses until they discover that something's happening and that there's a fraud attack happening. And then they will build up the defenses against those attacks, and then the fraudsters will go somewhere else. So it's an ongoing battle.
And so your business is super client-centric, not just to acquire customers, but also to retain and then offboard them as well. In our discussions ahead of time, you shared some of the ways you focus on the post-purchase experience, both internally but also like externally with your customers. Do you want to walk through some of these points with our audience, please?
Yeah, happy to. I mean, the client is at the center of everything we do, and it starts from our very simple mission statement. We help people. We want to have a long relationship with our customers and keep them happy along every interaction they have with JustAnswer, whether it be with our experts, our desktop or mobile platforms, our customer success team, and even when they decide to cancel. Happy and satisfied customers lead to good word of mouth, which is a fantastic acquisition channel. People trust the people they know, and it's a huge vote of confidence when our customers recommend us to their family and friends. Many of our customers who do decide to cancel do ultimately decide to come back and reactivate their subscription, as I said before. That happens, depending on the month, anywhere between 6 and 7% of the time. They need answers to their questions, and they come back knowing that they can get them with us. That wouldn't be possible if they weren't initially happy with our service, including the dispute and cancellation process. If a customer does decide to cancel, we want to make it easy, not only to keep them happy, but to prevent a dispute. We have a very customer-friendly cancel and refund policy. However, if a customer decides to contact their issuer first, we do our best to provide the issuer with enough information to help them inform our customer about their membership. Maybe they don't remember us by name, or they didn't realize they subscribed to our service. We use order insights, and that can provide the issuer with the information our mutual customers need to understand the charge on their billing statement. Then hopefully they make the right decision to contact our customer success team to cancel if that's ultimately what they want to do. Our platform allows our customers to easily cancel online or get in touch with a customer success agent via chat or phone. And ideally, the issuer makes that suggestion, for their card holder to contact us first before filing a dispute.
Thanks, Ben. And it's true that while it's super important to keep the customer happy, you also have to protect your business and ensure the processes that you have work for you. Can you talk us through your experience at JustAnswer about the dispute and fraud mindset internally?
Yeah, well, we hope the customer will contact us to cancel rather than filing a dispute. Sometimes that's just not the case. We look at the dispute process as another opportunity to refund the customer if they weren't happy with their experience. We use CDRN and RDR, and that's where they come into play. As I mentioned before, we have a customer-friendly refund policy, and CDRN and RDR allow us to extend that policy into the dispute process. But, we also want to stay out of the dispute monitoring programs, and we're not looking to push too close to the program limits. These products do help us prevent disputes from becoming chargebacks. We can catch the dispute in flight and provide a refund before it becomes a chargeback. We haven't spent a lot of time yet trying to figure out the right rules and configuration to put in place to stay just under the program limits. Our goal is to stay well under the program limits for now. We'll eventually fine-tune this approach. We get a lot of disputes that are tagged with reason codes for fraud, and we still refund those disputes through CDR and RDR, but unfortunately the fraud counts against us in the fraud monitoring program. I'd like to see the issuers do a better job discerning when to code a dispute as fraud. And Maybe the network should also do a better job of providing enforcing standards for what issuers should code as fraud if they're not going to reverse it against our program total, even if we proactively refund or win the chargeback. To just drive the point home a little bit more, if a customer didn't read through our checkout page and simply checked all the boxes on the page without reading them so they could get their question answered as soon as possible, then later they saw the recurring charge on their billing statement, that's not fraud. That's the customer just being in a major rush to get their question answered and or being trained that they have to check the boxes to complete the transaction. It could certainly be considered a consumer dispute if they didn't understand they'd be billed later, monthly, but it's not fraud. When it comes to integrating these solutions, we prefer to go direct to the solution provider rather than through a reseller. It just comes back to how we build our systems over the past 20 years and the dedicated teams we have that support them. We have a pretty robust engineering team, and we like to have control over solutions as much as we can. We've also adopted various solutions before they became widely available through resellers. There's, in our view, more work involved with undoing these integrations to integrate to a reseller, and quite honestly, it's a low priority for us to put resources against replacing an existing process that works today when there are other opportunities to grow the business. But yeah, I should caveat that not all merchants have the resources to go direct versus working through third parties, and depending on platform and strategy, it can make a lot more sense to go through resellers.
Ben, thanks so much for the amazing insight into your culture around the post-purchase experience, disputes, and also fraud. I'm sure our audience are very grateful for how candid and open you've been. Usually disputes are what I call the dirty little secret. Everybody has them, but nobody really wants to admit about it. Which is actually an interesting segue to the next topic in the webinar, the transparency that disputes can actually bring to the entire ecosystem. Greg, jumping to you now, dispute transparency is a new-ish concept. Can you help our audience understand it just a little bit better?
Yeah, that's right, Peter. Verifi noticed this need for increased transparency, and how we think about it is connecting customers to important information using any available channels that those customers are connected to. And the reason for that is we know that disputes are a big problem for all stakeholders across the ecosystem and carry costs for all those parties. In recent years, we've started to see attention from card brands on disputes that are focusing on improving the customer experience in this, that post-purchase stage. But the transparency is key, and it's something that's been lacking, over the past decades as solutions and technology resolve disputes outside of the payment rails.
So further to Greg's point regarding the need for transparency, this is really something that Visa has been working to improve for the last several years. When you think starting back in 2001, Visa was thinking about how they could re-engineer disputes. In 2005, we launched Visa Resolve Online, which we refer to as V-Roll. And so what V-Roll is a centralized system for managing disputes from inception to resolution. It isn't something that's optional. It's actually been mandated that both issuers and acquirers respond within this centralized system. Then moving on to 2018, Visa Claims Resolution was launched. And then fast forwarding to 2019, Visa acquired Verifi to introduce real-time refunds with rapid dispute resolution and Order Insight, which was designed to increase the visibility and data sharing across the dispute ecosystem. So it's something that Visa is continuing to evolve. We try to continue to improve the experience for all parties that are involved in the ecosystem. There is a major communication gap today. What cardholders know, what issuers know, and acquirers and sellers, it's not shared throughout the ecosystem today. So with the design of these enhancements, the aim is really to improve the experience for everyone.
So continuing with the transparency theme, a recent report from ITA showed that 67% of frequent online shoppers wanted full receipt details for their credit card charges. So Steph,
yeah,
how does data transparency improve the customer experience and make those 67% of people happier?
Well, that's a great question. So when I think about Order Insight and the name of the solution, it actually does just that. It shares order details in real time with all parties. So when you think about improving the customer experience, you're giving issuers access to what the merchants know about the sale before they have to escalate it to become a dispute. So if a customer is confused about a billing descriptor, if they're unsure who purchased something or what was purchased, thinking about the digital banking app, it would give the cardholder the ability to actually click on a receipt. When it says show full receipt detail, today when you click on them in your banking app, nothing comes up. So we need more issuers to be having their banking customers looking at their apps. We need more merchants to actually be proactively sharing these digital receipts so that everyone is in the loop on what's happening within the ecosystem today. And so in order to deflect and prevent disputes, if more information is being shared proactively, the customer service agents within an issuer could actually pull up those order details in real time to see more information about what was purchased and to answer questions about a transaction. So basically, when you think about the way that Order Insight is built into vRole, the centralized dispute processing system that's used, when an issuer needs to double click essentially on a transaction in question, they can call out to the merchant so that they can get more information about what was purchased. It can actually share store location, the map of a ride that was taken, SKU level data that shows what was purchased, digital receipts, past interactions with their customers, calls from the customer to their customer support, all their past history. There is so much information that can be shared within the system. So when you think about putting something together for a representment today, you're essentially just pre-representing. You're sharing the information proactively so that Order Insight can leverage that and share it with all the parties that are involved.
Ben, you use Order Insight at Just Answer. How do you guys find it most useful?
Yeah, we use Order Insight, and we really think of it as a way to extend our customer service all the way to the issuer. If we can provide enough information to the customer through the issuer to give them a bit more clarity about their interaction with us, then that generally results in a happier customer and hopefully stops them from moving forward with a dispute. But what I really like most is that it's an added layer of defense in our strategy to prevent a dispute for fraud. I've talked about fraud kind of sticking before, and we want to do everything we can to limit the number of disputes with a 10.4 reason code. Once that happens, there's no going back. We can't get it reversed, even if we are successful in winning a chargeback.
And Ben, I know you guys, in sharing with us, another layer of defense that you guys use at Just Answer is rapid dispute resolution, or RDR. And for those of you on the phone that aren't familiar with RDR, essentially what it does is it allows merchants to proactively resolve disputes in a pre-dispute stage. So thinking back to the comment I made earlier, talking through this specific MCC slide, it gives those merchants who want the opportunity to resolve the dispute up front that opportunity. And it does it by using automation and rule sets that merchants set that fit their business needs. And the happy outcome of that is not only a better experience on the customer side of things, but it does help manage the dispute ratio. It keeps you out of monitoring programs. Obviously eliminates any potential costs associated, and then creates some of those operational efficiencies that just throwing bodies at certain problems can't really solve. I've seen this implemented in a number of different ways with different clients, but I think really it's utilizing this tool to help support what the clients are wanting to accomplish, not only within their own business, but for their customers.
So now we've heard about how rapid dispute resolution works. At this point, Ben, I'd like to bring you into the discussion to talk about how you are using RDR. Would you talk us through your approach and how it's evolved and how the product helps improve your business and protect it as well?
Yeah, sure. Our philosophy is to refund the customer if they're not happy. When I joined Just Answer 2 years ago, we were in dispute land and we were in the program. We wanted to get out of the program as quickly as possible, and we were doing a number of things to make that happen. However, COVID hit, and it had an exponential impact on our growth. People were now stuck at home, and they were looking for help. Our medical, veterinarian, legal, tech support, home improvement, and especially our homework verticals took off. Between February 2020 and April 2020, just 3 months, our new customer base grew 124%. We didn't expect such massive growth, and it really caught us off guard, which resulted in operational issues that drove more disputes. Things like longer wait times for experts to answer questions and longer wait times for those who did call or emailed our customer support team. Our customers, in some cases decided to charge back instead of waiting for the expert to answer or to connect to a customer success agent. Now, we quickly worked to resolve all the operational issues. Chargebacks for fraud still grew out of proportion from what would be expected during normal growth cycles. Between March 2020 and September 2020, we saw the number of fraud-related disputes up almost 160% compared to just the normal consumer disputes up about 42%. But we hadn't changed anything about our acquisition channels, our funnel or refund policy. So, really we have to attribute the driver to the uncertain economic environment and just resulting in more first-party fraud. People needed answers to their questions like, how does shared custody work during a lockdown? Or, I don't know, if I can't pay my rent, will I be evicted? But they were also unsure if they would have jobs and fearful that we wouldn't give them a full refund if they canceled their membership. So instead, they went to their issuer as a way to get their money back after getting answers to their questions. So, when RDR came along, we wanted to immediately adopt it to bring the chargebacks down. We didn't want to risk a wait-and-see approach to determine if RDR really worked for other merchants as first adopters, because we needed to get the disputes down after the COVID surge. We also wanted to test a new business model that we had on deck, and we knew that new business model could potentially drive more disputes. That new model actually removed our 7-day low intro trial membership and instead only offered a full membership. And while we expected that new model to have an impact on conversion, we did expect it to accelerate disputes, the curve itself, due to the higher price point of the membership. So we were an early adopter of RDR, and at the same time, we didn't place a lot of emphasis on adjusting rules to allow some disputes we felt we could win through the review presentment process to come through the door. We just wanted to get the disputes down. We had to get the chargebacks down. So, I mentioned the multiple layers of defense before, and what we found is, by using Order Insight, CDRN, and RDR together, we were able to reduce our chargebacks by as much as 55%. So, pretty significant.
A reduction of 55% is amazing, Ben. But as you look to the future and how you adapt your business, what do you think the future of dispute evolution is going to be, and how do you think it's going to impact your business?
Yeah, the future. Yeah, that's interesting. I've been around payments for a long time now. In the beginning of my career, I saw most of the investment go towards products for issuers to reduce risk and provide incentives to grow their cardholders. That really got out of whack and got out of balance with the acquirers, so investment shifted in their direction. But from my perspective, the only real impact for merchants was to improve card acceptance by focusing on the terminal and mainly in a card-present world. There's a lot of talk around 3D Secure. It's been around for a while and it's been promoted as a way for merchants to shift the fraud liability. But the early versions haven't seem to truly help merchants in at least North America yet. Thinking about the future, I do see a lot more investment going on in the card not present space, and I see it in products such as the pre-auth risk scores that are out there used to block some of the potential fraud before they can get in the door and become disputes. See, I also see it with authentication, such as two-factor authentication, 2FA. I see in the mobiles too, the Pays, the Google Pays, the Apple Pays. And, they make it a lot more difficult for a customer to claim that someone else fraudulently made the transaction. Maybe, the use of data that's less visible to typical customers that's a potential game changer for disputes as the industry evolves. And things like device fingerprinting, IP addresses, geolocation, those make it easier to not only know your customer, but we can prove it was them, right, when they dispute a transaction. That's hard data that we can collect and use to fight the chargebacks. But I also think the networks need to adapt too. If a merchant can use this hard data to prove the transaction was absolutely completed by the cardholder, then the network should back those transaction dollars and get them out of the monitoring programs, especially the ones for fraud. I guess, personally, I think kind of going back to these programs, the one-size-fits-all approach to dispute and fraud limits, it's really got to change. I'd like to think the schemes will address this because there's no comparison for fraud and disputes between small and medium-sized e-commerce merchants and the likes of the automated fuel dispensers, the quick-service restaurants, supermarkets, even some of the massive e-com guys out there. But, managing the overall payments industry average fraud and chargeback ratios, it's a high bar for e-commerce merchants. I think it was the 2022, the MRC Global Fraud and Payment Survey report showed that it was in North America, it was like 3.4% of e-commerce orders led to chargebacks. I mean, that's an industry study that puts the number over 3 times the limit. Merchant groups are trying to use data like this to help make real change, and so I see it evolving in that direction as well.
Ben, it's amazing how your business has pivoted to handle the increased demand for your products over the last number of years, but also adapted to make sure that you're protected and that the customer experience is exceptional. I think your story is a story that a lot of merchants are familiar with. In addition to that, as a society, we've seen a huge transition from cash-based transactions to card not present. And I believe that this dependency on CNP isn't going to go away anytime soon. Consumers are becoming more comfortable with shopping online. They're becoming more savvy with new payment methods, wallets, etc. But Ben, as you alluded to, the use of technology to allow the right transactions through and catching the bad actors, it's a balancing act, right, for all merchants and anyone doing business. Merchants want to ensure that the customer experience throughout the checkout is optimal, and even in the post-purchase experience also. So to end today's webinar, I'm going to throw one final question to everyone. And I'm going to ask, Greg, I'm going to come to you first. How do you think merchants can find the right balance?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Simply put, I think the way to find balance is to understand there is no cookie-cutter approach when it comes to disputes. I would encourage merchants to really understand the impact disputes are having on their business and really explore new ways of thinking, potentially new solutions and technology that are going to support their vision of what the dispute landscape is for their particular business.
I think finding the right balance depends on the tolerance and customer service policies of each business, really. Of course, there are best practices and minimum fraud solutions that sellers want to take into consideration. You can't assume that any fraud prevention or dispute prevention is a set it and forget it. Time changes every business, and what worked last week or last month may not work 6 months from now. So it's something that it needs to continue to be looked at.
Yeah, okay, I'm last on this one. So Just Answer's philosophy is to keep the customer happy while we use multiple layers of defense to mitigate disputes. We lean more heavily towards the customer experience, but we'll evolve how we use these solutions based on our business needs going forward. I do agree with Steph that the best practices and a minimum set of solutions are needed to help strike the balance. I mean, merchants need to understand the size and scope of their problem, the resources they have to invest to fix it, and which solution or solutions best fit.
Customers have such high expectations, and I have to admit that I myself am one of them, but I do return to merchants who treat me great and who I have a fantastic experience with. I have to agree with our speakers today that the balancing of the customer experience, policy, technology, and understanding your own dispute landscape, including your resolution methods, are sure ways to ensure happy customers return to purchase again. We're about to open up our Q&A portion of today's webinar, but before moving on, I want to thank everyone for joining us. We're super excited to continue our webinar series here at Verifi, bringing you this content and engaging with your questions. Greg and Steph, as always, thank you so much for your time and insight, and a huge special thanks to Ben for his open, honest, and insightful discussion about Just Answer and their approach to the post-purchase experience. Please do send through any questions that you have on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll open the Q&A now.